Hello, people. Welcome back to another edition of No Singles Allowed, where I just do a quick review of a movie that I went to the theaters to see, usually by myself, but I actually went with a friend this time. It was a great experience. But I went to go see Sinners this weekend. And, I gotta be honest, when I first saw the trailer for it on X, I was interested immediately. It's the kind of movie that really hooks you even from the trailer. Just seems like a fascinating plot. Obviously, Sinners stars actor Michael B. Jordan. And what's interesting about it is that he plays twins in this. I think they're the Smoke Stack twins, right? Like Smoke and Stack. And I apologize if some of my details are off because I'm really going off the dome with this. But yeah, they were he played twins, and that's one of the most impressive things about the movie to me off the rip. Is just like the technology that they have now to have the same actor on the screen at the same time playing like his twin. Stuff like that used to look really janky and bad back in the day. But there really wasn't a single time where I was looking at it and thought, oh, this is obviously special effects. I mean, it's obviously special effects, but it looked good. Like that was one of the most impressive things about the movie to me. But basically, yeah, he plays these twins, Smoke and Stack, who are returning down south from Chicago to their hometown to start up a juke joint, right? Which is like it's basically like you could say like a bar like bar type club or bar slash club would have been like back in the day, right? The boom boom room. That's basically what a juke joint was, like a little bar in the club. They were they came down south and they bought this meal from definitely not Klansman white man. They bought it from him to turn into a juke joint. And the movie takes place in the 1930s in the deep south, like Jim Crow South. So you see a lot of like, you see some of the various issues pertaining to the area in terms of like race relations, right? You see the Ku Klux Klan. One part that stood out to me was when I think it was Stack. He was talking to this white girl that he had relations with back in the day before he went up north with his brother. And when they were talking, he was nervous about it because they were in public. And so like they couldn't talk like face to face normal, right? He had to look like he was looking past her to talk to her because they were, again, a black man talking to a white woman in public, right? Not exactly acceptable in 1930s. In the 1930s in the South, right? Jim Crow South. But little details like that, just kind of reiterate how far we've come, right? We're in the fucking black era, right? And what about damn close to 100 years ago, you couldn't even be seen talking to a white woman like that. But yeah, a lot of the early movie is them pretty much trying to set up the juke joint to open up that night. So they're like collecting or gathering people that they know for different purposes, right? So and like for instance, there's this young cousin that they have named Sonny. And interestingly enough, I feel kind of bad for the actor that played him because so much of the promotion for this movie focused on Michael B. Jordan for obvious reasons, right? But Sonny plays a significant role in this movie. Some would like he's just as much of an important character as Smoke and Stack. But he's their younger cousin, and he grew up in the church, and he has a very conservative, God-fearing father who doesn't like that he is getting into the music scene, playing the guitar, singing, and definitely doesn't like the fact that he's linking up with the Smokestack Twins or his gangster ass cousins to play in their bar. But that's basically why they wanted to get him on board, because he's a really good singer and guitar player. And of course, you need entertainment for, your juke joint. So that was his early involvement in the story. Like they just wanted to pick him up so they could have some entertainment. They also got this guy named Cornbread to work as security. There was another guy named Slim, who's like this older black man, and he's an alcoholic, but also very good at playing the harmonica, very knowledgeable when it comes to like blues music and stuff like that. So they got him for the entertainment purposes as well. And it's funny because again, I was in the theater when I watched this, and I'm telling you, the audience, the crowd, they loved Slim. They love that character. I've seen the actor that played him in a couple things. The role that stands out to me the most was when he played the dad in Romeo Must Die. I think Aaliyah's dad or her character in that movie. That's why I always remembered him from. Was that her dad? Whatever. But good actor. But man, to me he was one of the surprise performances of that movie. One of the best performances. Again, I hate that I don't have his name off the top of my head, but the guy that played Slim, he did a great job with that role. And again, the audience, they loved him. He was such a funny character. But again, like, one of the things I liked about his character was like the way he talked about the blues, as an art form, as music, because it really made me think about it. Because he went on about this story about how, a black man that he knew came into some money and was, castrated and wrongfully lynched by white men. And then there's a part in the movie where they drive past like these prisoners who are doing like prison work on the side of the road, and and he tells Sonny that he knows all those guys, right? But again, it's just like it makes you kind of realize that when people say singing the blues, they're not saying that just to be cute. Like the blues is an experience that you can express. Like it's a really a depth of sorrow and negative, traumatizing experiences that you express through music. And that's part of the reason why I like this character so much. Not just that he was funny, but I think in little different scenes and subtle ways, he did a great job of expressing what the blues really meant. That's why I really like that character. But oh yeah, and this is a vampire movie. By the way, I haven't even talked about that yet, but to be honest, that's probably my least favorite part of or aspect of the movie. But yeah, the early part of the movie is pretty much just them riding around and gathering up their friends and different people to be able to run this juke joint. Now, obviously there are supernatural elements to this movie because of the whole vampire thing and all that. And they kind of ease you into it a little bit, right? Because Smoke, the other twin, he goes to meet up with his ex, his baby mama, but their child is deceased. And what you learned about her was that, she's into like witchcraft or voodoo roots and things like that. And it's kind of interesting because, in my community, to this day, there are people who practice stuff like that. I know people in my own family who dabble with stuff of that nature. I don't, but like, I know people who wear the little necklaces and the charms and shit. Like that's something that is really practiced in parts of our community. So, just another detail that was relatable for me. Maybe not directly, but I know people who dabble and stuff like that. But anyway, she's into roots and witchcraft and all that. And, they had a conversation about how she would always, was doing rituals and stuff to make sure that Smoke was safe no matter in what situation he was in. He revealed that he still wore the charm that she gave him and whatnot. But the reason why I like that scene was, again, I thought that it was sort of easing the viewer into like the more supernatural aspects of the story. Because really, if you wouldn't have known that this was a vampire movie beforehand, you would have thought this was just like some movie based on like some, how they always got to release like some movie to show how racist white people were back in the day. One of those kind of movies, or just like a movie that's supposed to be about that time period for black people. So you would have never thought it was a vampire movie watching the early part of it. But the vampire stuff jumps off a little bit after that. And she has some big ass titties too. Man, Smoke's ex, the Lord. Oh man. But now the more supernatural parts of the story get revealed a bit later, as they're starting to really finish up on, getting all their friends and the juke joint ready. There's a scene where you see a white man running away from someone and his body is like not on fire, but it's like smoking, right? And immediately you know what that is, right? Vampires can't be out in the sun. And, you could tell that this was a vampire trying to get away from the sun. So he runs to this shack that's kind of like I won't say the middle of nowhere, but kind of in the middle of nowhere. And he knocks on the door, bangs on the door, and, this white couple, they open the door. And he's telling them that he's being chased by Indians, right? The Indians are coming and that they need to hide him. But he makes a great big point out of needing to be invited first, right? Now, if you don't know, one of the old school vampire rules is that vampires can't enter a residence without being invited, right? One of their biggest weaknesses. And honestly, I think that's a vampire rule that should probably be forgotten. And I'll talk about that more later. But they invite him in, and then the Indians come. And so it's the wife at the door. And the Indians are like, did you see this guy? He's very dangerous. We're looking for him. But she denies seeing him. And so, just using basic context clues, you can tell what's happening here, right? The Indians were in the know about the existence of the vampire or vampires, and they've been hunting him and or them. And they almost got this guy, but he got away. But the sun was going down, so they didn't press the issue, right? They just warned her, like, if you see this guy or you let him in, you fucked up. and then they leave. So the lady, she goes in the back and realizes that her husband got killed by the fucking vampire. And there you have your introduction to the vampire element of this story. Right. So far the movie is good. Man, I just want to stop here. Right now I'm super into it. Everything is flowing perfectly. Again, like you have likable characters, Smoke and Stack, they're cool. You got Sonny, who was a welcome surprise. I didn't know that character was gonna have such a prominent role, but Sonny, Slim, you got the introduction of Stack's white ex-girlfriend, and Smoke's ex baby mama and all. So just a great cast. All the characters, all the pieces have come together nicely, right? And so finally you have the grand opening of the juke joint. And there's one scene in particular that stands out to me here, right? And so, of course, Sonny was brought on board to be part of the entertainment for the night. And great singer, great guitarist, and all that. But now, the scene that happens when he does his set, I gotta say, it kind of took me out of the movie a little bit. Now, I get the significance of it, but it took me out, right? So I was just completely submerged in this movie. I mean, I almost forgot that I was in a damn theater. I was so into it. But when Sonny starts doing his set, they begin to show like the spirits of entertainers past and present. So from the past, you see like the African tribes and them dancing around the fire and beating the drums and all that, right? And then you see from the future artists from like the Funkadelics 1970s, 80s period, right? And even further along into like the 90s and 2000s hip hop, you know, the DJs and on the scratch. Now, this isn't happening, but it's like the explanation is that, you know, when you have a singer or artist that's so good, it summons the spirits of entertainers and artists past and present, right? And I respect the approach to expressing that idea, right? Like, I get what they were going for, but I'd be lying if I said that shit did not just completely take me out of the movie. Because when you see, like, again, this is a movie that takes place in the 1930s, and all of a sudden you see a motherfucker on a damn scratch table, right? Somebody with a mic doing hip hop, and they had a part where you can see like the guys with the big long white tees and the red bandanas and shit. And I get it. I get that they were trying to connect, you know, black history and entertainment and music and culture from far deep in the past to where the movie was set to where we are today. I get what they were going for, but damn, it just took me completely out of the movie. So I respect it, but I think that it should have been executed better, because it really took me it took me out of the movie. I can't lie. But I'll go ahead and explain the deeper significance of the scene as well. So when the vampires do arrive, they take a particular interest in Sonny because of, you know, his ability to do that, right? Because of, you know, they want to make him a vampire so that, you know, they can utilize his talents that can summon the spirits of, you know, artists, entertainers, musicians, past and present, right? So that's when you see the vampires take interest in him in particular, that's why, because they want his talent for their ranks. But this is happening before the vampires arrive. And so the vampires, they finally show up, and it's 3 white people. And remember, this is the deep South 1930s, full-on Jim Crow, racism, KKK, Klansman, lynching niggas. So you have a juke joint or having a party, a bar, an establishment that is primarily black. You have 3 white people show up. You know, that ain't right. That ain't cool. So they come to the door, and the people inside like Smoke, Stack, the bodyguard or the guard at the door, Cornbread, Slim, Sonny, they all come to the door to kind of see what these three white people want. And they're claiming that they just want to come in and join in on the festivities, right? That they're singers and they want to entertain just like everybody else. But now at this point, they don't know that they're vampires. They just don't want them coming in because they're white, pretty much, right? And Smoke made a great point about it, and he said, "Oh, it'll be cool up until the point where somebody steps on their shoe or spills a drink on them, and now you have conflict and issue between a black man and a white man, and that can escalate, right?" And Smoke, I should probably explain a little bit, about the Smokestack twins. Smoke is the more like discerning, smart, careful one of the two. He gangster as fuck, but he just more like aware and tuned in to what's going on. And like he's pretty much the brains of the operation. And Stack is more of like the people person, a little bit more extroverted, outgoing, gregarious, fun type of guy. But just good at communicating and dealing with people. Better than Smoke in that regard. So they both have their strengths and their weaknesses, right? But that was very wise of Smoke in terms of his reasoning to not let them in. He didn't know they were vampires, but just the fact that they were white, bringing them in could have caused a problem if there was an issue between them and some of the black patrons. And that could have escalated to, Klansmen showing up, right? Which, spoiler alert, happens anyway. But but like I said before, one of the big vampire rules is that they can't come in unless they're invited. So since they weren't invited in because they were white, they had to pretty much go off and go sit down around the corner. Now you would think, oh, well, this is great. Movie over. But remember, Stack, he has a white ex-girlfriend. And he's interested in, these three white people who came. Right? Because he sees that it could be potentially a money-making opportunity. And, his ex, the white girl, she's the only white person that made it into the party because of, their past relationship and whatnot. And even that was dangerous when you think about it. But, she was in there. He was trying to get her out, but, she didn't want to leave. And so he used her to go talk to the three white people that showed up earlier to see what they wanted and if they could turn it into, something profitable. So she goes out and she talks to the three let me say it, vampires, but she doesn't know this. But when they start acting really suspicious, she pulls a gun out and tries to get away from them. She's like, I ain't dealing with these motherfuckers. And so as she's heading back to the juke joint, she's attacked by the vampire. And right here we have one of my first issues with the movie. And it's that some of these significant deaths or like people being turned into vampires are never shown. So you see her like walking away and then you see like one of the white guys like just jump into the air and then it cuts to a scene on the inside. But obviously she's being, killed and turned into a vampire here. But again, that's not the only time that somebody is kind of like an important character is killed and changed into a vampire off screen. And I think that was a bad move because, and I know that this isn't necessarily unheard of in horror movies. Like you do have people that are killed off screen or there's a cutaway or something like that. But I don't think that really did the movie any favors because you're trying to portray yourself as being a horror movie, but and so much of the first half of the movie isn't really horror related. Now things are finally going, and you're cutting away from, you know, what should be significant death scenes, right? I want to see the bitch get shit, I'm dead. And they're not showing that. I think that was a bad move. And it's not the first time it happened. I think there are probably at least three significant characters that are killed and changed into vampires almost completely off screen. Bad move, in my opinion. But she's transformed into a vampire and she goes back into the club. Now, of course, she's invited back in because she still has to go by the vampire rule. But because they know her and she was already in there, they, you know, invited her back in, right? So now she's in the club or in the juke joint and she links back up with Stack. And so they go off to have sex and she uses that as the opportunity to kill and turn him into a vampire. And so at this point, this is when shit really gets jumping. So Smoke walks in right as she's killing Stack, like biting him on the neck. And he immediately draws down on that bitch and shoots the fuck out of her, right? I mean, dual handgun, just lays her the fuck down, right? And then goes to help his brother who was in the process of dying, bleeding out. And then the white girl, she jumps up and runs out. And so right there, you know, something supernatural is going on. And I think it's Smoke's baby mama she's the first one to kind of put the pieces together because of her knowledge of the occult and the supernatural, if you will. But yeah, you know, Stack, he dies in his brother's arms. So, you know, very sad moment for Smoke and company. And, you know, they go ahead and they end the party there. They send everybody home while they try to figure out what the fuck happened. And from this point, it doesn't take long for them to kind of get on board with the whole idea of, oh, wait, there are vampires out there. Because the guy who was guarding the door, he went off to go pee. Right. And me and my friend, we were talking about this. Like, dude, why the fuck? Why the fuck are you gonna go a mile down the path into the woods to go piss? Bruh, I would have peed like right there by the door. Not in front of it, but I would have went like a few steps and just peed right. Like, why you gotta go all the way to the woods? I can see if you gotta take a dump. But he was taking a pee. And then that's how he ends up getting killed and changed into a vampire. Right? And so when he comes back to the juke joint, you know, obviously he has to be invited in. But because of what just happened, right, they're very suspicious of him. Like, wait a minute, why do we have to invite you in? Like, you've been coming in and out all day. Why don't you just come in? Right? And so more and more they're starting to realize what's going on as far as, like, you know, the vampires outside and things like that. You know, so they realize Cornbread has been changed to a vampire and they don't let him in, and he ends up revealing himself. I think Smoke tried to hand him something, and then Cornbread tried to rip his damn arm off, but they managed to get him off of him. And from this point, they pretty much have a good grasp of what's going on, right? We're stuck in a juke joint because there are vampires outside, but they can't get in unless we invite them in. And this goes back to what I said earlier about one of the biggest problems with this movie. Because of them having to abide by the rule of the vampires can only come in once invited, it's like, well, you won because they can't get in. So anybody that hasn't left already is pretty much good. Now, at this point, the vampire numbers have grown significantly because I think that, you know, they managed to kill and change a lot of the people who left the party after Stack got killed, right? And so at this point, it's like way more than the original 3. It's like 20, 30, 40 of them out there just dancing around and singing and shit. But as long as they don't invite them in, then they're good. Oh yeah, and Stack ended up becoming a vampire, obviously, but they managed to get him out too. So the white girl is gone, Stack is gone, all the vampires are outside. So it's like, look, let's just stay in. Now this is where shit goes left, right? So there's an Asian lady whose husband went outside to get the car, and he ended up being killed and transformed to a vampire. Now the way these vampires work, when they turn into a vampire, it's like a hive mind. So they learn everything that the people that they have transformed know. And so the leader of the vampires, because he got the husband of the Asian lady, he knows that they have a child or a girl, a teenage girl at home. And he threatens to go kill her unless they invite them in. Now, okay, that's not a bad threat. But think about it. If you let him in because of that, you're all gonna just get killed, right? And then they can still go kill your daughter later, right? So you think that the vampires are gonna be honorable and not kill your teenage daughter, right? Because you let them in and kill all of you? Like, come on now. But that's the threat that they use, to convince her to invite them in. And so that's basically what ends up happening, is that the Asian lady ends up telling them to come in order to prevent them from going to go kill her teenage daughter. It's just stupid as fuck. I mean, just, oh my God, bro. And this scene just really captures where this movie fails, in my opinion, right? And when you have a situation where the monster or the killers can't even get inside unless you invite them, right there, like the survivors are pretty much OP. I just think that should have been out the window. I get that, the memes that are sprouted from that vampire rule, I've seen people like joke about it and whatnot, and it's a little interesting. It made for some interesting interactions, like when Cornbread tried to get back in. I got you. But I think ultimately it hurt the movie because it forced the survivors in a situation where, how do you get them to invite the vampires in or go outside? There's no reason to go outside once you figure out what's going on. So now the only way the vampires can get you is for you to invite them in. And so now you have this Asian lady who just like, come on in. And as the audience, when you're watching that, you can't help but say, man, this stupid bitch. Fuck this, you fucking idiot. That's not how you want the vampires to be able to get in. Or that's not how you want to escalate the situation, is what I'm saying. You don't want to be escalated by somebody's stupidity, right? And that's why I feel like that rule should have been left out. It would have been better if the vampires were breaking down doors and windows. I'm talking 30 days a night type shit. We got to board up the windows and block the door, and we got to hide here, and that's better, right? And so what you end up having is like this big grand battle in the juke joint where the vampires rush in and the remaining survivors are having to fight them off. right? Where they have, of course, they have guns and a rifle, but they also got garlic and holy water, all the magical tools and whatnot. Because remember, they got Smoke's baby mama in there, and she's very much into these types of things anyway, so she knows how to give them what they need, stakes and all that in order to defend themselves. So it's like you have this big action sequence where the vampires rush in and they're pretty much killing off the main characters one by one, right? He's down, she's down, right? And it ends up being like a big fight between Smoke and his twin brother Stack, who is a vampire now. And on the outside, Smoke cleared the way for Sonny to get away by jumping out the window. That was a good scene because the people in the audience, they loved that when when Sonny jumped out the window. It kind of reminds me of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre when the girl jumped out of the window. But yeah, the audience, they love that shit. But he jumped out the window, and he ends up having a confrontation with the head vampire. So you have Sonny versus the head vampire, or if you want to call it that. And then you have Smoke versus Stack, who is now a vampire, going on still on the inside as the other characters being killed off and killing vampires and whatnot. And so Smoke ends up killing Stack finally. And it seems like right before he killed him, Stack was able to kind of like come to his senses a little bit, right? To show that it was a little bit of his brother left in there, right? And then Sonny, he ends up like hurting the head. I was like he didn't necessarily kill him. Like he put like a blade, basically like jammed a blade in his head. And then the sun started to come up. And then the sun ended up killing the head vampire and the rest of the vampires alongside him. But this just goes back to what I was saying earlier, right? That Asian lady, she let the vampires in when it was literally 20 minutes to sun up. They had 20 minutes left. It was 20 fucking minutes to sun up. So they wouldn't even had enough time to go all the way back and kill her daughter anyway. So, and that's why I say like that scene, I'm not gonna say it ruined the movie, but it was a failure in terms of escalating the situation properly. Cause I get it. It's kind of like when you look at Night of the Living Dead, where you have the survivors held up in the house. Now, obviously, the situation has to escalate to where the zombies are getting in and it's the final rush. And all right, but how do you get there? And, like with Night of the Living Dead, they get there because of trying to escape. And then in trying to escape, they lose two of the survivors. The truck gets blown up. And then Ben ends up attacking the other guy because he tried to close it. So it's like the escalation of events is done well, right? It's done in such a way where the audience can go along with it. Okay, like, oh, okay, yeah, all right. So, but in this case, I think that's one of the worst things about this movie is that it really fails to properly escalate the situation once they know what's going on. Because once you know that there are vampires outside, but they can't get inside, stay your ass in the house. Shut up. It's that simple. But of course, if they do that, you don't have a movie. So you have to, and that's why I have to reiterate, I think that them following that archaic like you don't even see a lot of vampire movies that follow that rule anymore. That's some damn Christopher Lee, Peter Cushing, Hammer House, Dracula, 1960s bullshit. They don't do that no more. But that's why I just feel like they should not have included that rule. Stakes, Silver, holy water, garlic, cool. Great. Right? But keep it to the damn, some Legacy of Kain shit. Not this, Dracula bullshit, Nosferatu. Damn. I know it's the 1930s, but shit. And so it's like they pretty much had to escalate it through somebody's stupidity or rashness. But like, yeah, it's like they were 20 minutes to sun up, man. And so, yeah, the vampires end up dying because the sun comes up after Sonny badly wounds the head vampire. I think one thing that you realized, though, in that situation was that the vampires weren't just connected by a hive mind. If you hurt the head vampire, it hurt the rest of them, too. So I think that's what you kind of realized, because they were all surrounding Sonny. But when he jammed that blade in his head, it hurt everybody. Right. And then the sun came up and just finished the job. So by the end of the night, you have Sonny and Smoke as the only survivors. Everybody else got killed. And so Sonny and Smoke go their separate ways. Now, Smoke, he stays because one thing that he learned from the vampire. So remember this. When the head vampire, his first victims in the movie were the white couple that let him in. But they were KKK. And so when he turned them, he learned what they knew. And the husband knew that the guy who sold the twins the meal to use as a juke joint, the plan the entire time was to sell it to them and then come back that next day with the whole clan, kill them and take it back. So that way they have the money and the meal. And the vampire tells Smoke that, while they're talking at the door. And Smoke, he remembers this after, the whole night and the ordeal is over. So he says, look, I'm going to protect mine. So he stays at the mill knowing that the KKK is coming that morning so he can defend it. So he has like this big standoff with the the Klansmen that show up. They don't show up in like white hoods and shit either. I know how it sounds. But it's just like a gang of racist white men show up to kill them and take the meal back. And but they don't realize that Smoke, he was in the army and he got a lot of guns, and so he ends up killing them off one by one, and kills the guy that sold them the meal with the intent to take it back from him. But he ends up being shot in the process, and so he's bleeding out. And as he's bleeding out, he has like I guess he's like transitioning to the afterlife or whatever. And so he sees his baby mama who died that night, and their child that died years ago, right? Which is part of the reason why he had left her, I guess. But basically the whole scene just is showing him like dying and transitioning to the afterlife, and he's able to hold his baby that died all those years ago. So he's dead. Good scene though. I'm not trying to downplay the significance of this. Like, to me, that's one of the better scenes of the movie. I like that, seeing the big black man take down the racist KKK with the Tommy gun and the sniper rifle. That was a good ass scene. I like that. And then just again, as he's dying, seeing him connect with his baby mama and the child that died, that was a good scene, right? But that's the end of the Smokestack twins there. That's the end of them. So Sonny, he goes back home to church, right? And he got scratches on his face. He's traumatized. He all fucked up. And so he comes into the church, and his dad, I guess, like, I don't know if his dad had prior knowledge of vampires or whatever the case, but he knew for sure that Sonny had a wild night. And, you know, church is in full service and all that. And he's like, come on, son. Come on. Come home, son. And so he embraces Sonny, and he tells Sonny, drop the guitar, drop the guitar, drop the guitar. Right? Because he sees the guitar as being like Sonny's connection to the world of sin and the devil. Right? Because early in the movie, that was one of the things that he was warning Sonny about. You know, you keep going out dancing with the devil, one day he'll come home with you. And it seems like that's exactly what happened. But now, see, this is the interesting thing about this movie. And I know that it kind of rubbed some people the wrong way in terms of the message that it sends. Now, I want to go ahead and say I'm an atheist, so I look at it differently than somebody who's a Christian might look at it. But in the end of the movie, Sonny does not drop the guitar. And what you learn about Sonny throughout the movie was that he always wanted to leave his hometown and go travel, you know, basically be a traveling musician and try to make it big. And I think the way the movie is framed, you would think that, you know, after having a night like that, Sonny is supposed to have like this realization of, oh, I got to put the guitar down and, you know, be a pastor like my dad and go back to the church. And right, basically, if you're scared, go to church. But he doesn't do that. He runs off with what remains of the guitar and goes off to pursue his dream of being a music artist, a traveling music artist. And so it fast forwards to the 90s where it shows that, you know, he has fulfilled his dream. He's an old man now, but, you know, he's still doing music and whatnot, right? And so what I realized, though, was that, you know, some of the more religious or Christian people of the audience, they kind of took that scene the wrong way. I guess I just say it rubbed them the wrong way because they took that as him embracing sin and running away from the church. Now, I look at it a little bit different, right? I don't think that because he didn't put the guitar down means that he just decided to live a life of sin or anything like that, right? I just think that he did, like, that event that night didn't convince him to give up on his dream of being a musician. Right? Just because you do music doesn't mean that you have to be living a life of sin. Because one thing about him, remember the movie is called Sinners. That night he ends up having sex with a married woman. Right? And so, you know, with different characters, you can see like their particular sin. Right? I mean, with the Smokestack Twins, they're just straight up gangsters who quick to pull the gun on you, you know, getting into violent situations and things like that. You got Slim, who's an alcoholic. You have Stack's white girlfriend who is cheating on her husband. Sonny's hookup who's cheating on her husband. Right? So, again, that's why the movie is called Sinners. Because most of the main characters who were in that juke joint that night were involved in some kind of sin one way or another. But again, I think that, and it surprised me too. I was surprised that that's how they ended the movie. Because I feel like the typical thing would have been to have Sonny drop the guitar and then to live a life in the church and hallelujah, amen, Kurt Franklin stumping and shit. But it didn't end like that. And, you know, I gotta be honest, I kind of appreciate that because to me, it was an unexpected way to end it. I think 90% of people would have expected it to end with Sonny dropping the guitar and becoming a man of the church after having a night like that. Like, that's your first gig and you get attacked by damn vampires. Shit, I think I would have found God that night. I would have, boy, even my black ass would have been in church after that shit. But nah, like he left and went off to, so, but again, I think that maybe the director will go into greater explanation, but I think that you could interpret that different ways. I don't think Sonny keeping the guitar and going off to pursue his dreams means that he abandoned God and the church. You can do both, right? It can be hard, right? Because obviously, you know, especially back then, you know, that damn chitlin circuit, a lot of temptation. But you know, I'm just saying it doesn't necessarily mean like it was meant to be like an anti-God or anti-Christian message at the end, right? I think you can look at it as being like still positive, right? Right? You don't have to assume that he abandoned the church completely just because he didn't drop the guitar. Fuck. But okay, overall, this is a long review. Shit, 50 minutes, God. I give the movie a 7 out of 10. And to me, the best parts of the movie had nothing to do with the vampires. I feel like the vampire stuff was very poorly executed. And I think a lot of it had to do with them sticking to the rule of having to invite the vampires in. I just don't think that was a good idea. Interesting, but in practice just didn't work for me. And I feel like with me, and this could be my own personal taste, right? Like, I like horror movies with a more traditional approach in terms of like the main characters getting killed off one by one by one. And it kind of starts like that, right? The vampires get the white girl who gets stacked and then cornbread. But two of those are done off screen. And then after that, it's pretty much just a standoff, right? You got the survivors on the inside, vampires on the outside. And it's not until the Chinese lady foolishly invites them in that you have pretty much a clash of the two sides where you just seeing the survivors get taken out one by one that way. And I'm just saying, and me and my friend, we felt the same way, that it would have been better, or we felt it would have been better if perhaps, like, let's just say in theory, right? When Stack got turned to a vampire by the white girl, right? What if they didn't realize that he was a vampire up until that point, right? Like, they see him bleeding out and he passes out and then wakes back up, but he blends in. And then, right? So maybe have the vampires on the outside, right? But then have one or two on the inside blending in, killing people covertly, right? I'm just saying, maybe that would have been better. But I feel like once you have that divide, okay, they're on the outside, we're on the inside, there's nothing they can do. Right? Okay, well then how is anything gonna happen without somebody doing something fucking stupid? Right? And yeah, I just think that the vampire stuff was just, it was poorly executed. It wasn't done very well. And I would almost say the movie might have been better without it. Right? The movie might have been better if it was just about the Ku Klux Klan attacking the juke joint that night. Maybe. Because then it just would have been like a straightforward movie about, you know, a time and place, you know, of Jim Crow, racism, the Klan being able to, you know, freely go around and do horrific things to black people. They could have taken that angle. I appreciate the approach that they took, because I think that's what hooked people though, right? The idea of a vampire movie set in that time period, in that culture, with black people. I mean, cause just being honest, in the theater, it was mostly black people. So I think it's a movie that mostly appeals to, my people, my culture. But again, man, I almost feel like the movie would have been better without that shit because it wasn't done very well in my opinion. But it is what it is. 7 out of 10. But some of the highlights about the movie, again, Michael B. Jordan, I think he did a great job. The Smokestack Twins, very likable characters. Just super just gangsta ass niggas, bro. just gangsta and super cool. I mean, those guys about as cool as like your favorite anime characters, right? And also had some surprise great performances. Again, the Slim character, Sonny, and just little scenes here and there. But again, like a lot of the movie, my favorite parts of the movie was like before the vampire stuff really went into high gear. But yeah, that's my thoughts on the Sinners movie. I'm definitely going to do more movie reviews going into the future. I had a great time at the movie theater. And if nothing else, what I liked about going to see it at the movies was that it was kind of packed that night. It was a nice crowd in there. And I love seeing the crowd reactions, like seeing when they would laugh, seeing when they would like get spooked a little bit. I really love that. And it just kind of reminded me why I like going to the movies, right? So I'm gonna start going there a bit more. So you're gonna see more of these in the future. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. And I will see you next time. So, Johnny.